All right, so now it's not advancing my slides. Hold on. All right, there we go. Okay, so welcome to the 7th installation of Automation Hour. I'm Jennifer Lee. I'm here with my co-hosts, David Litton and Rakesh Gupta. And happy Friday, everybody. So for Automation Hour, for those who are joining us for the first time, we meet on Fridays every other Fridays from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Our next session and our last one for this year is scheduled for actually next Friday because of the Christmas holiday. So that will be with Megan Broadkey next Friday. And we are currently in the process of planning for the January and March session. So we should have something posted for all of you shortly for those sessions as well. And if you have a cool automation use case and solution that you'd like to share with those in the community, follow that link and submit your idea and we will get back to you. All right, so logistics here. Off lines are muted. Please use the chat function to ask questions. You can ask your questions throughout the whole entire session. And then after the presentation, we'll take Q&A. So your questions could be related to the presentation itself or just general automation questions. And for resources, you can post additional questions out on our success community, Salesforce Automation Hour. And for our website, we do post our prior recordings out there as well. So with that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for sponsoring this webinar series. And for those who don't know what we look like, our co-hosts, Rakesh, Jen, and David. So really excited for our next guest presenter, Mike Gill. Personally, for me, I have a connection to Mike. He was my MVP mentor, so I want to thank Mike personally for his support in my MVP journey. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Gill.
All right, thanks, Jen. Okay, let's turn this over. It's not allowing me to click on that. I'm clicking show my screen and it's not working. Oh, God. Ah, here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Perfect. All right, let's get this show on the road. Let's just turn this on. All right, thank you, Jen. So this is me. My name's Mike Gill. So I started with Salesforce back in 2009. Prior to that, I was working with a company called NetSuite. I'm currently working as a technical architect with 10K View. So these guys are worth checking out if you're an independent consultant, or equally if you're an end client looking for Salesforce work, please check them out. So the other thing that I do is I help run one of the user groups in London. We had our Christmas party last night. I was driving, so I'm not hungover, you'll be glad to know. As Jen already mentioned, I'm an MVP and I helped her become an MVP. So that's one of the other things that I am. I co-write a blog with Chris Edwards called the Salesforce Weekly, and we're planning on relaunching this in the new year with something special, so watch out for that. So apologies that we haven't been writing weekly up until recently. And you can find me on Twitter as Agent Gill. Okay, so no guesses for what we will be learning a little bit more about today, apart from automation. Yeah, entitlements, it says there. But more importantly, how we can automate those. I'm going to assume that not everyone knows what entitlements are. If you do, great. Then you can probably predict some of the things I will be showing. If not, I'm going to quickly tell you what they are now. So what are entitlements? These are a group of features designed to help you provide the best possible level of support to your customers, which is pretty obvious. I know, I mean, who wouldn't want to provide a good level of support? But a big part of what this feature set does is it helps us manage and keep tabs on what your customers are actually entitled to, which is probably why it's called entitlements. What these features actually do is help you define, track, and enforce what is more typically referred to as a service level or service levels within your organization. Therefore, if the term entitlements puts you off a little bit and isn't resonating, you might as well just swap it for service level agreements, which is perhaps a better way of describing what entitlements does for you. Okay, of course this webinar is not about the benefits of entitlements or even how to configure it. You can head to Trailhead for that, so I'll put a link there at the bottom. But it's more the opportunity it presents to us to go just a little bit crazy on the automation front. So why do I say crazy? Well, I have not one, but 3 use cases based around entitlements. And when I started kind of collecting this for this webinar, I've actually found 3 more use cases. So potentially there's more to come. So let's go to the next slide. So what are we going to look at today? So I said we were going to go a little bit crazy. So we're going to start with setup and we're going to add entitlements to an account. Okay, this is a bit of an overhead which we can address using automation. So with entitlements, each account would need its own set of entitlement records, so we can automate that, which you'll see in a sec. Next, we're going to look at how we can drive a bit of consistency in our case logging by making sure that the correct entitlement is added to the case by default. So a classic one there is a case comes in via email, we want to make sure that that case gets an entitlement. Okay, and then the last one is all to do with tracking. Okay, this one's for the support agents. We want to give them some help and make sure that we can auto-complete their case milestone. So if they are successfully responding to customers within a defined service level, we want to make sure that the milestone gets completed automatically. So that's our journey for today. So it's a lot of stuff to cover. So please feel free to fire questions and the guys will answer, or we can answer at the end. Okay, so let's move on with the first use case. So we want to offer 2 levels of support to our customers, professional or enterprise. Now, I purposely kept this simple, but in your own organization, this could be bronze, silver, gold, phone, web, high, medium, low. It doesn't really matter, but for the purposes today, we're going to keep it very simple. As I mentioned previously, we want to automatically set up an entitlement on the account based on the account support level. So what do we need to do there? So we need a pick list field on the account that has our support levels. We need 2 entitlement processes, so we're keeping it simple. So I've got a professional and an enterprise one. And I'm going to introduce custom metadata here for storing details about entitlement processes. So quickly, what custom metadata is, okay, if you're familiar with custom settings, it's very similar to that. But how is it different? It's different if you were to refresh your sandbox and you had a load of stuff in custom settings, you would have to reload those in because custom settings are data, whereas a custom metadata is actually metadata. So every time you refresh your sandbox, your custom metadata would still be there. So we're going to roll that into the example as well. So on the automation side, how are we quickly going to do this? Well, we've got a flow for deactivating existing account entitlements. We're going to create a new flow for activating them, and then we're going to bring those together. So what we don't want is to have one huge spaghetti flow. We want to have kind of two flows that we bring together, and then we fire it off using a process to run those flows. All right, so let's dive in and look at this one. So I'm just going to come across here. So I'm going to go into setup and I'm going to navigate down to flows. So we've already got our expire entitlements flow. We're going to create a new one for creating account entitlements. So we'll just give that a second to load. Okay, the first thing I like to do when I come in here is pre-set up some of the variables so that they're already there as I'm building out the flow. So the first one that we need is a variable for our account ID. So I'm going to call this var account ID. This needs to be input because Process Builder is going to set this variable. Sorry, Jen, I'm just going to miss out the description and all of that stuff because I just want to make sure that we get all of these in. I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call this var support type. Okay, this one needs to be input as well. All right. So I'm also going to just jump ahead and create some collection variables. So these are for storing a collection of records. So in our case, we want to load from our custom metadata the entitlement that we want to set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call collection variable. Oops, sorry, not collection variable, an S-object collection variable. Okay, I'm going to call this entitlements for insert. So into here will be the entitlements that I'm going to insert. Okay, I'll create another one. I'll call this entitlements custom metadata. So I'm just going to shorten that to CMT. And I'm going to find my custom metadata. It should be here. Sorry, active entitlements. You can see this is custom metadata. It's got a suffix mtd. Okay, so I've got two collections there. So I'm just going to check to make sure that they're all there. So we've got a variable for account ID, support type, and we've got two collection variables. One for holding the entitlements that I'm going to insert, and one for holding the custom metadata, which I'm going to load as part of the flow. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is do a fast lookup. I'm going to call this lookup entitlements CMT, and the object that I'm going to look up is active entitlements. All right, so now I need to apply some filtering to this. So I want to make sure that I pull out the right records from my metadata. So we need support type equals our variable. So I've already got that set up there. So I've just typed var and it's just loaded up the variable that I pre-set up. And then I want to say, oops, sorry. Isn't there? Okay, in fact, that's the only thing I need there. What I want to do now is put that into my entitlements collection. And I want to select the fields that I want to pull back from this. So I want the ID. I want the entitlement ID, sorry. And I want the support type. So these are two custom fields on that custom metadata record. One's got the entitlement ID and one has the support type. So in this case, it would be professional or enterprise. All right, so that's my first thing. So next I need to loop through that. So I'm going to drag a loop onto canvas. I'm going to call this loop metadata. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to loop through my collection. So I already have my collection of metadata records here. And I'm now going to insert it, sorry, not insert it, I'm now going to assign it to a single instance of that. So I've only got one in this example, but if you had multiple levels here, this is why you would take each one out in turn. So I'm going to call this entitlement CMT. So this is a single instance of that. Okay, so we're going to loop through a collection of entitlements and assign it to one. I'm just going to join this up now and then bring on assignment. All right, so now we're going to create a new entitlement. So we're going to loop through the custom metadata and we're going to create the required entitlements. So I'm going to call this new entitlement. Okay, I'm going to create my new S-object variable. I'm going to call this new entitlement. This time I'm going to pick entitlement. Okay, I'm just going to come in here and hit backspace. So now what this is going to give me is the fields that I need to set on my new entitlement record. So account ID we have, so I'm going to go equals var account ID. Okay. I'm going to pick up SLA process ID. This is actually the entitlement ID that it's expecting here. Hold on, missed a step here. Sorry, 1 second, what's happened? Okay. Right, that's fine, sorry about that. Oh, the assignment window is gone. Let's put that back again. So new entitlement equals account ID, new entitlement. Let's find our SLA process ID equals. So now we're going to jump to our entitlement metadata, which you see here. I'm going to pick up the entitlement ID. So we want to give this entitlement a name. So I'm going to find name here. I'm going to make that equals, and we're going to pull up now support type. Okay, so support type is professional or enterprise. So we're going to set our entitlement name to be that, so it's clear. And we're going to set the start date because we want this to be active. So I'm going to find the start date here. Sorry. Equals. Now I'm just going to default this to the current date. Okay, and that's my single instance of my entitlement record. I'm just going to loop that into there. So for every row in our custom metadata, if there was more than one, it would keep going through that, creating the new assignments. Sorry, the new entitlements. Right, so now we need another assignment. So now we need to add this to our collection. So I want to add this to our entitlements to insert. So I'm going to call this Add Entitlements. Okay, and we've got entitlements for insert. I'm going to say add. I'm going to put my new entitlement in here. And I'm going to link that up like that and bring that back into the loop. So that will go through all of the custom metadata records if there was more than one and set up the assignments. Sorry, entitlement. I keep saying assignments, I mean entitlements. Right, okay, so the last thing here we need to do is do a fast create. Okay, so insert entitlements. Bring up our entitlements for insert. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that that's saved. Create entitlements. Okay. Now, it's warning me because I haven't created a start item, but what I mentioned previously is we want to hook in an additional flow. So I'm just going to bring the expire entitlements in here. So if our customer is going from professional to enterprise or whatever it may be in your own environment, we first want to expire those. So I've already got a pre-existing flow, which I'm just going to use here. Okay, I'm just going to cheat a little bit and just set the account ID, target and source to account ID. I'm just going to do the same here as well, because I don't actually need too much here apart from those filled. I'm going to link that to here. I'm going to set this one to start. Make sure that that's clicked. So let's save that. Okay, so there's our create entitlements. That's our existing expire entitlements. I'm just going to close this down and activate it. So I'll just go back to my list of flows. So we've got 2 entitlements here. So now we need to create the process. So I'm going to come into the process. Okay, so I'm going to call this count, create, or edit processes. So if you had more than one sub-process, they would all be launched from this one. So I'm just keeping it all with one process. So in here, we're going to call the account object. And I need this to fire when it's created or edited. And now I need my add criteria. Sorry, I need my entry criteria. So I'm going to call this create entitlements. So I need to set up some conditions here. So I want to set up support type needs to be filled. So we want to say is null, is not null. Sorry, is null. We want support type is changed, is true. And we want support type is not null. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and just customize the logic a little bit. So there's 2 scenarios. If they were creating an account and they put in an account support type, we want to get the entitlement immediately. And equally, we want to cover off if they're changing it as well. So I'm going to go 1 or 2 and 3. Okay, so simple logic there. I'm going to come in here and call my flow now and set this part up. So let's go to the flow, create entitlements. I'm going to call my create one. It's going to ask me for my variables. So I'm just going to pop in account ID. Pop in the support type. Choose that, save that, and that's ready. So let's activate that one. Okay, right, so let's come out of here, let's give that a test. So let's come to my account, I'm going to come to Global Media. So these guys are on Enterprise. If you look up here, they don't have any entitlements, so I'm just going to fire it to Professional. And we now get a Professional entitlement. But what would have been a better demonstration, now they're going to pay and they're going to upgrade to Enterprise, which is good news. If I save that, we now get 2. But let's just draw your attention, we've got an end date for the Professional, so it's still active, but you can't put an end date in the past. So tomorrow this will become inactive. So they've now got the Professional entitlement linked to their account. So that's the first use case. Hopefully that was all right. Let's go on and let's have a look at the next one. So let's switch back to this. Okay, so use case number 2, we now want to add entitlements to the case automatically. Okay, so incredibly enough, the official Salesforce documentation says that you need to write a trigger. Now, of course, we're here on the automation hour, so we don't want to be writing Apex. We want to be building some automation. So the use case is very simply, we want to set the case entitlement field automatically when the case is created. And we want to look up the existing account entitlements and determine which one to set. Okay, and it's a simple flow to look up the account entitlement and a process again to execute our flow. All right, so let's come back and look at this one. So back into flow. This one's a little bit easier. Let's go flow. So again, what I want to do is set up my variable. So in this case, I want to set up the account ID again. It needs to be an input because Process Builder is going to pass it in. So now I just need to do a straight record lookup. Okay, so look up entitlement. Find the entitlement object. So now I want to make sure that I'm pulling back what I expect. So it needs to have an end date. So we're going to check that the end date is not null. Okay. Oh, sorry, is null even. But it's active. So I was in the right field. I was expecting a Boolean. Okay, so it needs to be active. Okay, so that will ensure that it's active and it doesn't have an end date. So next we want to pick up the entitlement ID for this account. Make sure I get the ID. And we want to assign that to a variable. I'm going to create a new one. Okay, that's all we need. The next thing I need is a record update. So this is going to be an update case. Oh. I need a variable here. Case ID needs to be input. And the field that I want to update is entitlement. And I have my entitlement ID, I thought. Okay, my bad. I didn't use var in front of it. Okay, so we've got to look up to get the entitlement, then a record update to update the case. Call this set entitlement. Just save that to make sure it has a starting one. Purposely not adding any debugging or anything like that. I'm just keeping it very simple. So obviously this could be more elaborate if your requirements need it to be, but this is just simply now getting our professional or enterprise entitlement from the account. So I'm going to save that, close that, make sure that's active, and then I'm going to jump to Process Builder. Okay. Now I'm going to create a new process to launch this. I'm going to call this Case Create Processes. So in here would go all my processes that run on Case Create. Okay, I'm going to pick up the case object here, and we only want this to fire on Create. I'm going to save that. I'm going to add my criteria, set entitlement default. So I want to make sure that I have everything that I need. So we definitely need an account ID. So I'm going to say here, account ID is not null. Okay, so we've got one of those. What else do we need? Entitlement ID is null. So if it doesn't have one, so we're just going to leave it like that. And I'm going to hit save. I'm going to come into the add action. I'm going to find my flow that should be waiting for me. Set entitlements. Let's add in the variables that we need. Account ID to get our default entitlement. There it is. Our case ID, so we know which case to update. All right, I'm going to save that. I'm going to activate that. That's now ready to test. So I'm going to come into this email and I'm just going to fire off an email to case. Cannot log into community. All right, so that's gone off. Let's jump to our cases. Okay, and it hasn't worked for this one for some reason. Let's just check quickly. Did I activate it? Okay, I see the problem. Actually got this the wrong way. That always confuses me. Let's try another case, port. Okay, all right, that doesn't work for some reason. Okay, damn. We'll come back to that. So let's push on with the last one. Okay, so the final use case is autocomplete case milestones. So what we want to do is, when an agent is working through, they successfully respond to a customer via email. If that constitutes a first response, we want to auto-complete that case milestone. Now, incredibly, the online information, actually tells you to use Apex as well. So this is another example where we can just jump in here and use process. So in this case, this is purely process, so we don't need flow. All right, so let's come back out of here. Let's head over to process. All right, so we're going to create a new process. So this one is centered around email. So I'm going to call this email create processes. Okay. Now this object is polymorphic, which means it's used across many different objects. So you have to be quite careful with what logic you use here and where you position that. So we're going to have that on create. Okay, and we'll call this auto-complete first response. So I'm going to set some criteria here. Case ID is actually the parent ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say starts with 500, because I only want this to work when it's a case email and not an account email or an opportunity email. And I'm going to hook in to the status, and I'm going to say when it is sent, so when an agent is sending out the email. So that's the only criteria that I'm going to have here. All right, so then my immediate action, I now want to update the related case milestone. Okay, so update case milestone. Okay, so select an email message record that started your process or a record that was related. So I'm going to hit this. I'm going to come through to cases. I'm going to find case milestones. Okay. All right, so now we actually need to see if I can just get two windows open here. Unfortunately, I can't. Hold on. What I need is the case milestone ID. Copy that, go back into my process, jump back in here. Okay, so let's find that record again. So update related records, record related to that, which is related to my case. So I'm going to drill in there and pick up case milestones. Okay, so now I need to set some conditions. So there could be a ton of milestones on here, but what I want to do is make sure that I have just the milestone that's first response. So I'm going to put the ID in here. And I also want the milestone that is not completed. So completion date is null. True. What I want to do is set the completion date to the current time. So it's a date time, so I need to go to and use a function. So I'm just going to use now, which will give me the current date and time. name. Save that. Okay, so I also want to update the case and set the first response field on my case object. So this time I'm going to add another action. I'm going to go update records, update first response field. This time, oh, sorry, this time I just need the case. I want to add some criteria, so I want to make sure that I only do that the first time. So first response, I want to be null. So if that's null, then set my first response date time. Again, I'm just going to use a formula and then function now. Get that in there. So I've got two actions. All right, so we don't need flow for this. This is purely process builder. Hopefully it's going to work. So I'm going to activate this. All right, so that's activated. So let's test this one. So I'm going to go to my account. It's got an entitlement, great. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm just going to create a new case. Pick up my contact. Give me case origin. Just populate some of these other fields. Okay, so we've got our case there, we have our entitlement, and we have our first response milestone sitting there. So the agent now responds officially to the client. So I'm going to pick up an email. Okay, we have your ticket. Please try this. Now, did I activate my process? Let's just make sure before I click that. Yes, right. So this should go done if this works. Hey, bingo, right. So we come down here, case milestone has been completed. All right, how are we doing for time? Depends how many questions do we have, or do you want to go back and just figure out why what the other one wasn't working? Jen, David, Rakesh? We can stop there for questions.
Actually, I don't see any open questions. So for those still out there, give you a few minutes to submit any questions that you have for Mike. Okay, so someone is typing up a question. Okay, I see you, Mo. We'll wait.
I was just going to see why this one didn't work properly.
Okay, Zach has a question. Can we walk through how to use a similar process builder to close milestones with a case is marked as closed?
So so you don't actually have to use Process Builder to do that. You can do that within your milestone.
Does that answer your question, Zach?
So yeah, do you want to jump in that and kind of show how you can set milestone criteria?
Yeah. So
So you
what was
see
the
how
question? Go on.
So we want to close a milestone automatically once the case is closed.
So that should just, when the case closes, it just closes. There's an exit criteria. Does it close the milestone? Any active milestone is closed, I think.
Yeah. So if you see there, where it says case closed equals true for the case exits the process when that happens. So ideally, you shouldn't have to build a process builder to do that.
All right, the next question is from Ronald. What decision do you follow when choosing to use flow versus process builder versus workflows in this case?
Do you want me to answer that? Okay. Well, if you want to, yeah, a flow obviously is a bit more complex. As you saw, we're doing looping, deleting records, that kind of stuff. Your process doesn't handle deletion, so if you want to do any deletion stuff, you're going to have to go to flow to do that. But your process can be your entry point for that. But you can't do complex searching and create collection of records. So in the case of all of this stuff, this is a simple example, but if in the real world you might have many levels of entitlement that you want to configure, you couldn't look up custom metadata or any of those records and group them together and do stuff with them. So that would take you immediately to flow. And flow, you can't just run flow without process builder. You need a mechanism to do the stuff we were doing to launch it, and that's where process comes in. If you've got a simple thing where you want to maybe update chatter or just update kind of an extension of what you would normally try to do in workflow, but you couldn't, like update a related field, a simple field on a parent object, then you could stay within the realms of process. But as soon as you start thinking, well, I've got multiple decision paths and all of that kind of stuff, yeah, you need to be moving to flow and process builder. I don't know if that answers your question. Guys, jump in.
Yeah, he's fine. All right, so Mo's question is...
One day everything will be as one, and you won't have this decision. You'll be like, I want to build a process. And you won't be like, where do I start? It's the process. But at the moment, yeah, I can see why most people do get. It's like, what do I need? There's these two things. All right.
Okay, so Mo's question is it possible to create a set number of records via visual flow? So in the NPSS, creating payment records for each month, I would like to similarly create a set number of records I defined in the flow. Is that possible to create a set number?
Yeah, I think you could define just like, yeah, you could programmatically, obviously you can define how many you want in your collection. You can do the same thing in flow. I think that would make it rather complex, but yeah, I guess you set a variable that says this is the maximum number of iterations or loops I need to do, and when you hit that number, break out of your loop. In the example that I gave there, I'm just looping through until there's none left. There was obviously only one record, but if there was 10 records, it would have gone through all 10. But you just got to be careful there. I mean, it depends how many records you want to create. Things like payment processes and stuff, possibly you want to consider maybe Apex, dare I say it. But yeah, something like that, you want to be pretty sure. I don't know if anyone else, David?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Apex piece, just from my experience with it and the nonprofit pack is, if they're coming in bulk, you definitely want to make sure that you're not going to run into any errors when, if you've got a third-party app that's pushing, the the donations into Salesforce, then if you've got high volume, you definitely could hit some issues potentially with Process Builder and Flow. But you're able to do it with Flow through loops, like Mike said. It's just sometimes you do want to look into some Apex.
All right, we have one more question on the docket. On the define criteria for this action group, when setting criteria, how to enable or show the advanced criteria? All are met, any are met, or customize the logic?
Sorry, can you repeat that question, Jen? Sorry.
Sure. On the define criteria for this action group, when setting criteria, how to enable or show the advanced criteria? All are met, any are met, or customize the logic?
How to show?
So that will be based off of kind of two different things typically, or it'll be based off of what you like, what kind of criteria for executing the actions you select. So it's only when you hit the top one that you'll see the three options there. So if you're doing a formula, you're not, like, the formula evaluates to true. If you clone it real quick to allow us to kind of toggle it back and forth, then that should take away the conditions, because your formula will be that.
Does that answer your question,
answer the
Marlene?
question? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. Mo has one more question. Is there any future plans for Process Builder to include loops to create multiple child records? So we don't work for Salesforce, so we can't really answer roadmap questions, unfortunately. So I have not heard from Shelley Erksick or Scott, who's the product managers, that that's something that is upcoming. I don't know if Rakesh, David, or Mike,
So,
you've heard of anything.
I've not heard of anything, but in regards to creating a record like that, if it's always going to be a set number, you technically could just do a lot of record creates within your process builder. You just have to keep in mind that's not as optimized as a flow using a fast create where you're pushing them all in one batch entry as opposed to creating one every single time. So you technically can, but it's probably not ideal. You'll probably want to go through, either Flow or Apex, depending on how your environment is expecting to take in those new records.
Okay, last call for questions. We have 1 minute for someone to submit something.
Spot why this didn't work. The middle use case. It's always it's no, that's fine.
Great, I don't see anyone. What's a good resource for learning blogs, flows, blogs? AutomationChampion.com, that's Rakesh's. SalesforceSidekick.com, that's David's. JenWlee.wordpress.com, that's mine. SalesforceWeek.ly, that's Mike's. All right, so if there's not anything else or you can think of additional questions, definitely go out to our Success Community Salesforce Automation Hour and post additional questions. We'll get back to you then. And then we will post the recording and the deck after this session. So if you haven't registered already, register for our next session with Megan Broadkey, and that's at bit.ly/Megan Broadkey 1216. We'll also include that link in the deck that gets sent out as well. All right, have a happy Friday, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right,
Bye.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.